Okay, a video. So this is episode 9 in my series that's nominally titled Massive Societal Change. And episode 9, I want to talk about American refugees in America. So, what brought this about? There is currently a refugee crisis taking place in America. And it's silent. No one thinks of it that way. No one thinks of America as being a country of refugees. Of course, it has been in the positive sense that a lot of people who were having trouble in their own countries, let's just mention the Irish, for example, would have come to America fleeing, let's just say in the case of the Irish, a potato famine or political problems with the English or those kinds of things. So they would have come, and bigotry. The English were, and for all I know still are, hugely and catastrophically bigoted towards the Irish. So let's just allow that the Irish are one example of that. I'm not picking on the Irish. I'm just mentioning them because they're a fairly famous example. They came to America as refugees. And we're kind of accustomed to that. There are now a lot of Irish communities, especially on the East Coast, a lot of Irish culture in America. We greatly honor and respect our Irish culture and celebrate it pretty much across the entire country. So there you go. They have successfully added to the American experience, and that's always a welcome thing. There are more recent refugee influxes that are less welcome. How to say this? Because they're not white. There you go. Maybe that's the reason. Maybe it's just later in the game and we don't want them. But here is something that is flying under the radar. There is now a refugee crisis in America that is Americans. And, of course, America is now, this late in the game, again, a fairly diverse country. So the American refugees in America who are seeking relief? I guess that's what refugees do, right? They're seeking relief. They'll be white, brown, black. They'll be immigrants. We have American refugees who are first, second, maybe even third generation immigrants. We have American refugees that are white people who have lived many generations, say, in parts of the U.S. where, they haven't had these kinds of problems that they're experiencing now. And these people are becoming refugees. Oh, and we have wealthy people becoming refugees, as well as poor people, as well as the middle class. Although, to speak plainly, there are fewer poor people in the flood of refugees now moving through America than there are people with money, because it costs money to be a refugee in America. All that said, what am I talking about? I'm talking about climate refugees, which climate refugees has been a prediction of most scientific discussions of impacts of global heating on countries and regions, that they will be the expected floods of refugees, maybe a trickle, maybe a flood, maybe a trickle that just doesn't stop, maybe a flood that comes periodically. And we expect disruptions from these. The traditional approach to climate refugees is to assume that these are people coming from, say, let's just call them, I hate this terminology, but I've inherited this, okay? So forgive me in advance. I don't want to hear anything in the comments about the terminology. This is just what we're working with, all right? Poor countries, third world countries, underdeveloped countries, all right? Countries in Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia, Central America, South America. Again, this is narrative. Okay, I'm just repeating what people have been expecting or saying or are worried about. This is narrative. And I want to make a case before I get flamed in the comments that this narrative is actually brutally incorrect. The refugee crisis that's coming for the United States will not be external. It will not be from third world countries or developing nations or the imperial South or whatever, former colonial countries. The crushing refugee crisis will come from within America. All right, but I'm trying to set the context for what I'm about to reveal. So the expectation was that these refugees would be coming from the undeveloped world, the developing world, the global South, former colonial holdings, and they'd be people of color. They'd be brown. They'd be black. They'd be Asians, right? What color are Asians? Yellow? I don't even know. So that has been the expectation for about 20 years. And because that was the discussion, I actually held to that myself for a time. I thought, refugees. Well, the United States is somewhat uniquely positioned because we have almost an entire continent to ourselves, and friendly neighbors who are basically part of the same continent to the north and the south. The north, of course, is Canada, and the south is Mexico. So between the three of us, and we're supposed to be friendly countries, right? Supposedly, Donald Trump, what the fuck are you doing? Supposedly, they're friendly countries, and so the three of us, could kind of have this continent to ourselves. And that was sort of my expectations. Okay, there's going to be all these refugees streaming out of all these other countries, heading across borders heading across land masses that have borders. Land masses are real. Eurasia, Africa. Borders are not. You can't defend land masses. People just walk across. What are you going to do? So that there would be these massive influxes of refugees, mostly in places like Eurasia, possibly Africa, that don't have defensible borders, that are land masses that anybody can basically walk across or ride a bicycle across if they want to or need to. And that the U.S. would be somewhat immune from this because oceans. And to the south, the narrows of the Panama, the isthmus of Panama, and to the north, the boreal forest and the ice. So that America would probably be okay-ish for all of that. And then there was a paper that came out some years ago. I can't even tell you how long ago it was. 5 years, maybe 8. That actually there would be almost no cross-border refugees. And this is a very critical distinction. These words matter a lot. So before you freak out, these words matter a great deal. Cross-border refugees would not happen. I'm making bread. It's making a lot of noise. Can you hear it? I can kind of hear it. Should I close the door? Maybe I'll close one of the doors. Hold on a second. The bread machine does an amazing job, but it can be really loud at points in the process. So there's one door closed. So let's hope that helps. That the papers basically stated that there would be almost no cross-border refugees. The reason is because the people who rely on crossing borders, which is breaking the law, risking apprehension and deportation, risking prison, and these are families, right? These are families of refugees. This isn't some young man necessarily. Isn't necessarily. I mean, we're climate refugees, not economic refugees, not even political refugees. Climate refugees. So what is the demographics of climate refugees? It's families. It's entire villages. It's the elders. It's the children. It's the whatever. They just have to. They can't stay. They pick up their things, whatever they have to have, or represents their culture, and then they head across the landscape. And these are generally, again, I don't like, painting with this brush, but I'll have to use it. These are poor people. Okay, they're poor in money, but they're rich in culture. They're rich in tradition. They're rich in knowledge, but we don't value those things, do we? We just don't. We don't. When you come to the border, we value, what is it? Money. Okay? That's wrong. That's the wrong way to do this shit, but that's how we do it. So I'm stuck talking about that, all right? So these are poor people in terms of this. And they show up at the borders, and they're trying to negotiate their way, but they don't have much. And the reason why I'm mentioning border refugees at your border, is that these people have no story going forward. And this paper that I read about 8 years ago, or I didn't even read it, I read a summary of it, is that these people who don't really have a lot of resources of the type that we value most won't be able to become refugees. Some of them will make it to the border, but then they'll find hostility and bureaucracy and people wanting this, and they won't be able to cross the border. So there won't be border refugees. There won't be refugees of, again, families with children who are going to be taking on the risk of trying to cross a border where they can be apprehended, jailed, killed, murdered, right? They're enslaved. Are they going to do this? Some of them might try. Will they do this in mass? Or will they do this in the mass of volume of human misery that people have predicted since the beginning of this global heating shit show, which is now what, in its 40th year or so that we've really been talking about this, 40 years? And the answer is no, they won't. Most of them will, sadly, die in place. They don't have the resources, and they're isolated, probably isolated villages, towns that don't matter much, towns that don't have resources like trains and airports. The people who will flee these places, right? Again, what is it? It's the undeveloped world. It's the third world. It's the global south. It's the former colonies. That's okay. The people who do flee from these things will have money. They'll have money. And they won't be border refugees. Okay? You see the difference? The border refugees are poor people, and they don't really have options within their own country. Their real option is to struggle and then to die when the struggle fails. That's their real option. But the wealthy people, the money, they got the money, they won't be border refugees. They won't be showing up at the border. They'll have families, and they'll have heirlooms, and they'll have cultural baggage and everything. They'll have their religion and their rituals and their traditions. They'll have all that. They'll bring all that. But they won't be at the border. They'll be on an airplane, possibly a private jet. And Donald Trump has already offered them a $5 million gold card. If they have that kind of money to just get on an airplane and go, they may have $5 million. And they can just buy the gold card, and now they're in. Of course, he's a mob boss, so he'll shake them down periodically and want another $5 million. And he'll want it for himself. You give it to me, personally. Otherwise, I'll send my goons to your personal house. My personal goons to your personal house. Anyway, I shouldn't be talking about Donald Trump. He's such a fuckwit. Anyway, if you've got the $5 million, and you can do that more than once in your life, because you'll have to once you're inside the country, you can be a climate refugee, but not be at the border. So the whole narrative about the threat of climate refugees has probably been diffused. Now, we do have one example of this where there is a particular problem in places like the European Union, where some years back, just before Brexit and just before Trump administration won, as opposed to just before Trump won, version 1, and Brexit in the UK, there was a refugee crisis that originated in Syria, some of it also in Africa, where Syrian farmers had suffered a climate-derived drought for many years. Still ongoing, by the way. I don't think they've ever gotten out of it. And they fled into the Syrian cities, and this narrative is important, so pay attention to this. The Syrian urban planners and leaders didn't want the farmers, because all the farmers brought with them is hunger and families. So rather than try to accommodate these uh, internal refugees, they sent them to Europe. And said, look, let the Europeans take care of you. They got open borders. They've got so much money. That's what they claim. Why don't you just... And it was a cynical thing to say. It's just the Assad regime, which is now gone. I guess that's a good thing. It was the Assad regime just wanting to not share the ill-gotten gains of their, whatever, 20, 30 years of running that country into the ground, and just wanting to keep all the money to themselves. Of course, I'm projecting a little bit here. I don't really know what they were thinking, but that's my guess, right? It always comes down to money, right? Doesn't it always? It always comes down to money. So they sent all these people to Europe. And when these brown-skinned, Muslim, weird-speaking, non-European people showed up in Europe, the people of Europe freaked out. They just completely freaked out. All kinds of terrible stories coming out of Europe about what all the Muslim people were doing who were showing up from Syria and how terrible it was. And of course, the UK, which was forced by its membership in the EU to have open borders within the EU, wanted to close its borders. Hey, we're an island. We don't have to put up with these people. Oh, we're part of the EU, so people can come here if they want to once they're in the EU. Well, okay, we'll take care of that. We'll just get out of the EU. So that's kind of what happened, Brexit. And then Trump kind of came along and was reciting from the same hymnal book, hey, we're going to deal with our refugees and our immigrants. My wife is back. There she is. She'll be coming in. The U.S., though, never really had a problem with that. That was just populism, demagoguery. And we don't really have a problem with, well, we certainly don't have a problem with Canadian refugees, right? Or illegal immigrants, probably because they're white. There probably are Canadian illegal immigrants, but we just don't care. Well, we can't really care because we can't tell them apart from the regular people, right? But we have illegal, probably mostly commercial, or I should say economic, refugees or immigrants from Mexico. So that's where Trump focuses his ire, is on the brown-skinned people, and this is going on to this day. But we're going to have the same problem. We're having it now, and it's going to become quite accelerated and very noticeable shortly, of internal refugees. And again, like having Canadian refugees, you can't tell that someone is new to your community. You can't tell that they're bringing PTSD symptoms and that they've had their home and their community destroyed. You can't tell that they lost their job one year after year after year and finally went broke and bankrupt. You can't tell that they're fleeing economic collapse. You can't tell by looking at them. And they're white. So you can't project onto them. Oh, here's a brown-skinned person. I guess they're a refugee, right? They're here to make money. They're here to do all the things that refugees do that we don't like because they're brown. You can't say that of a white person from Florida or Texas or Arkansas. So what do? The United States of America, and here I'll focus on mostly the lower 48 states because Hawaii is, again, an island, so it's sufficiently isolated, and Alaska is basically an island, also isolated. So the lower 48 is essentially like the European Union. We have open borders. We have a transfer union. There's money that moves around internally in the United States of America, mostly out of California and New York states and into the others. So there's money moving around. And the people can move around between states freely. They can just do that anytime they want to. So that's what's happening. It's already happening. I have seen several stories about what's happening in Florida. I guess Florida gets to go first, but there's also something similar happening in Texas. Florida and Texas are heavily populated states. They're culturally white, Christian, wealthy. In Florida in particular, there's a lot of Mexicans in Texas, and this is the legacy. It goes way back, right? Remember the Alamo? Well, Mexicans have been big in Texas for a long time. They worked on the ranches. They owned ranches. They ran businesses. There are communities near the border in Texas that are, probably mostly Mexican people. And there's even has been up until recently, until the Trump administration, there was really free flow of traffic across the border between these communities in Mexico and in the U.S. Those people have no options now, but the white people can still move around. Florida is suffering. Texas has a lot of problems. But all of the problems boil down to one thing: global heating. All of Texas's problems and all of Florida's problems really come down to too much energy in the atmosphere, too much violence as a result. How does violence manifest itself in these places? Well, storms with resulting precipitation can be either rain or hail or both that are difficult to comprehend. Certainly in these places. They get storms in Texas. They get rain amounts in Texas that just boggle the mind. They didn't used to, but now they do. And people who are living in marginal areas, places that are kind of low down, rather than up here on the high spots that will probably be populated first, and then as cities fill up or as regions become densely populated, well then people start to build communities closer to the river or in flood zones, and so those flood. But it doesn't really matter why it's happening. It's because it made sense at one time to have suburbs in these low-lying areas, and now it doesn't make sense because the rains are too extreme. The rains are just completely nuts. And the same is happening in Florida. And Texas, the region of the U.S. from Texas all the way to Florida, that whole arc across the Gulf of Mexico is subject to hurricanes, which bring high winds and storm surges. And although hurricanes are not unknown in these regions, again, people have been forced, because of poverty or lack of economic means, to build in areas that in prior decades or 50 years ago would have been seen as, this is dangerous, don't build here. So people sometimes also build on the beach. People with a lot of money, not economically depressed, people with a lot of money build on the beach because they like the view. And of course the counties are like, well, if you want to build on the beach, I guess we shouldn't really stop you. You got a lot of money, you'll be able to take care of yourself, you'll be able to buy insurance, whatever. And you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. All right, good. So sometimes people are just seduced into building in places that in past generations nobody would. They just wouldn't do it. Okay, we have a guest. Busy place here. What's happening now is that because the storms are becoming more violent, not necessarily more frequent, but definitely more violent. Sometimes they're just really bigger, much larger, and so they can push more ocean ahead of themselves, and that creates a storm surge. Sometimes they're really big, and then when they do come ashore, the winds alone can impact enormous areas, and the harm that's happening is both more intense, more frequent, and a larger area. Hope you can't hear that. Maybe you can hear that. Anyway. So these events, which are now occurring sufficiently quickly enough that the communities can't recover, and are predictable enough that insurance companies won't insure these communities after like one or two payouts, they're backing away. Okay, this is a pattern now. Our actuarial experts are saying that these areas cannot be insured because they're just too dangerous to live. Maybe they weren't 20 years ago, but now they are. So we're not going to insure these areas anymore. We'll insure other areas, but not this area. And so these people are having to leave. Now, the problem with these kinds of disasters, and again, I'm getting back to internal refugees. The problem with these kind of disasters is that you're being pushed out of community, and you're not electing to do this. And also, you're being pushed out. No one wants to replace you. So maybe you don't even have a home anymore. Maybe it got knocked off its foundation twice and you weren't insured the second time. So you can't rebuild unless you've got a lot of money. But why would you rebuild if your home has been destroyed twice or flooded twice and it needs massive repairs and renovations internally? Why would you want to even live there? And maybe the insurance company won't insure you on the next time. And so at some point, even if you haven't yet, you're going to absorb this loss. And then nobody can buy your property to give you back your money that you invested because they're facing the same thing you're facing. They can't get insurance on a mortgage. The neighbors are all moving out. They're looking around like, why is everyone moving out? Why are all my neighbors' houses knocked off their foundations? And I just see foundations, and you're selling me this house between these two empty foundations? What's going on here? And they ask around. They say, oh, yeah, 2 years ago, we had a big hurricane come through here. We had a big storm surge come through here. Oh, yeah, we got wiped out. This house didn't, or it did partially, and they repaired it. But they repaired it just to put it back on the market and sell it, try and get their money out of it. And so they're not selling. These places aren't selling. And these people who are leaving these communities are leaving with nothing. They may have had something when they moved there. They may have been retired. They may have had a pension, but now they're leaving with nothing. Their savings has been destroyed by basically global heating. So they're having to go somewhere. They're having to leave. And there's a huge exodus out of Florida. I keep seeing reports of this. It's just reporting, right? Who really knows? I'm not there. I'm not on the ground. There's a huge exodus out of Florida because people, they've been financially destroyed, or they've lost their job, or they've gotten tired of the MAGA Trumpist baloney, or they're being driven out, right? Maybe they're Venezuelan or they're Cuban, and they're just being driven out by the intolerance that they're facing every day, and their kids are facing at school, and anybody who has a job is facing at work. We don't want you here. Who are you? Show me your papers, right? Sounds like Nazi Germany. And so they're leaving. They're getting out, but they're basically refugees. They're refugees inside of America. Refugees inside of America, and they don't want to be dispossessed. They don't want to be unhoused. They don't want to be going into communities that they're not familiar with. But they don't have a choice. They have to leave, and they're hoping maybe to live with family. Maybe they'll move to a community that's less expensive to live. So, they lost all their savings when they lost their house, but they still have some kind of a pension, Social Security payments or something. So they can, start over, rent a house, rent a mobile home or something. And so they can, they still have some income. They've been retired, whatever. And so they feel like they can live in another community, but it has to be really cheap. And it can't be someplace where insurance is going to cost you more than your mortgage, or it's just not available. And they've been burned, and they have PTSD, right? They've been basically booted out of their community as if it was a war zone. So of course they have post-traumatic stress disorder, and their kids have PTSD, and they're worried, and they've been mistreated, or they've been overlooked, and they're having all these problems, and so they're trying to go to another community. And these people, they'll just blend in. They'll just show up in your community, and maybe you won't even notice them. But they're refugees. They're refugees. They didn't come from Mexico, and they didn't come from any part of South America, and they didn't come from any part of Africa or any part of Asia. They're internal U.S. American citizen refugees. And there is a huge swath of the United States of America that really extends from the West Coast to the East Coast along a line that sort of includes, below which includes Southern California, all the way across the southern tier of states. So Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, the Gulf states, Florida, and then even some of the states on the East Coast, or even just north of Texas and Louisiana, because there are now massive storms apart from the hurricanes, which are big players in this story of internal refugees. There's a band of the United States kind of east of the Rockies, so the whole 2/3 of the lower 48 states, nearly. I mean, that's kind of overstating it, but it's a convenient metric. Just think about that area where people are being their homes, their communities, their livelihoods, their jobs, and even their schools and hospitals are being destroyed by severe weather. And all the severe weather, I know they have severe weather, we have tornadoes, we have hail, but this severe weather is relentless. It's kind of a joke now. It's like, well, every week there's another band of severe weather, including tornado outbreaks, which can be, a half dozen to 2 dozen tornadoes at a time. They're not big, but it's that many. And these tornado outbreaks and the severe weather, including the hail, which is very damaging. You get hail above about 2 inches, bigger than a hen's egg, or about the size of it can destroy your car. A big enough hail can destroy your roof. Your house can become uninhabitable because of severe weather. And all of this adds up. It all adds up between the hurricanes that come ashore and dump torrential amounts of rain, which they do. You have the winds and you got the storm surge, and then you've got the stupid rain. And it can, who knows where it's going to come down. That's where the path of the hurricane is. And then you have the tornadoes. And I'm not being a doomologist here. I'm just stating what's happening. This is severe weather. These are events that are driven and attributable almost entirely to global heating, because that's where the energy is coming from. That's where the moisture is coming from. You get severe flooding weather from global heating. Where do you think that water came from? It came from the Gulf of Mexico because it's hot. Why is it hot? Global heating. It's global. It's right there in the name. So the Gulf of Mexico is hot. It evaporates all this water. The water goes ashore. It finds conditions such that it can spin up severe weather, including tornadoes. And if it doesn't even spin up tornadoes, you get rain. You get huge amounts of rain. And this has been happening over and over for multiple years now. And the handwriting is kind of on the wall. And people who, lose their car 1 year, and that costs them money. And then they lose their roof off their house another year. That costs them money and maybe even makes the house uninhabitable and uninsurable, right? And some other year, some other group of people loses their livelihoods. The crops were knocked down by the hail, or the tornado went through the business district of their town. And, it's a little town. You can't find it on the map, but that's the town. That's where the market was. That's where the school was. That's where the things were. And now their town is kind of hollowed out. So can they still live here? Well, we hope the store comes back. We hope the school comes back. We hope that someone comes in here and spends money on us. But that could take years. And in the meantime, what's your story? You've been reamed out. You've been hollowed out. So what's your story? And it doesn't have to be a flood of people leaving a town or a region or a county to become, a noticeable amount of climate refugees. These are internal climate refugees. This cannot be stopped. But these people are going to show up, generally not in small towns. Refugees, as in Syria, and this is a critical thing to understand about these dynamics. Refugees don't go from one small town to another small town. They don't go from one town full of white people to another town full of white people, with the same values. They don't go from, the same type of rural agricultural community to another type of community that's rural and agricultural, because these are small communities. They can't handle a huge influx of people. So what really happens with refugees, and this happened in Syria, if you remember that story, they go to larger urban areas where they can be absorbed. Urban areas typically have services, food pantries, homeless encampments, services for mental health, services for refugees, basically. And some of the times those services were developed to handle refugees from foreign countries. So the services are there, and they were servicing brown people, all right? Also, many of our large urban areas have a lot of poor people. Again, poor people don't hang out in small communities. There's no services. Poor people, whatever the reason for their poverty, poor people go to urban areas because that's where the services are. So the urban areas are accommodating poor people from wherever. And then when these, not necessarily poor people, but climate refugees all the same. You don't have to be poor to be a climate refugee. You just have to have been living in a place that has become uninhabitable. Right? I mean, that's the criteria to be a climate refugee. You're existing in a place that has become uninhabitable. Now you're a climate refugee because of the climate. Global heating, actually, but that's what we're going to call it. Climate refugees. So these people go into the urban areas. And they're bewildered, they're lost, and of course they're angry. They're angry that no one helped them where they were. Where's my FEMA? Where's Donald Trump when you need him? And then they're angry because they're going into an urban area. And these are people, and I know these people. My family are these people. I would never live in an urban area and blah, blah. I mean, why? Well, because it's not for me, and I don't like the crime, and I don't like the violence, and I don't like the whatever. It's like, I don't notice any of that in my neighborhood, and there's very little of that in the news. So unless there's some sort of a conspiracy to hide some dark reality, it's not a bad place to live. And there's lots of services, and they're walkable communities, and I got a shopping center down there that I can walk to quite easily. And I got one right across the tracks that I can walk to, in 5 minutes. And there's parks, there's recreation, there's all this stuff going on, and not bad. I mean, it's not bad. If you want to be afraid of it, because there might be some strange colored people, I guess you can be afraid of it if you want to, but I don't have those problems. I don't know anybody who does have those problems. So what's the beef? But anyway, they show up and they have this beef. They got this axe to grind. I swore I would never live in this place, and now I'm living in this place, and I'm angry, and someone should have helped me to stay in Texas, and stay in Louisiana, and stay in Florida, Oklahoma, and Georgia. And no one helped, no one came, no one funded me, and it's all Joe Biden's fault, and it's all the fault of the woke. And it's like, yeah, you're in your second Trump administration. I don't know who you're blaming here. Well, it's the FEMA, and they only serve the poor black people, and that's why they're shutting down FEMA, by the way. This isn't the smartest bunch, okay? Shut down FEMA. They only serve black people. Well, now you need some FEMA. Your house just got knocked down. Yeah, but, it's the Biden administration's problem. I know I'm talking politics here, but I'm trying to make sense of internal refugees. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make sense of internal refugees. I'm trying to make sense of why they're going to be so angry when they show up. They're going to be livid. Absolutely livid. When the Muslims showed up in Europe, there was all this coverage about how angry the Muslims were and how poor a fit they were. France is Catholic and Germany is Lutheran, and here's all these Muslims coming in, and they want to impose Sharia law, and they want to impose Islam, and they want to impose all these things. Who knows what they want to do? Probably they just want to eat and have shelter because they're refugees. But no, we're going to project onto the Muslims. And the point is, they never fit in. And France was criticized quite vociferously for not integrating their Muslim populations who came there under duress. They just didn't do it. Why? I don't know. Did the white French people not want to spend money helping and integrating? That means training and language training and job training and job locating. Integrate them into the community because they were black or brown. I mean, Syrians aren't black, but you know what I mean. Did the white French, the Catholic white French, simply not want to spend the money? I don't know. It didn't happen. And so France was criticized by the rest of the EU for not integrating their refugees. So what's going to happen in U.S. cities? Are U.S. cities going to integrate their internal refugees? Now, we've been here before. This picture is a common picture. I mean, this particular picture is not a common picture. I had to look this up. But this sort of picture is common. This is black and white. Now, these are all white people. It's a family. Could be even two families. I see two adult men here. There could be even two families. These are what we used to call, and this was denigrating poor people is what this was. We called these Okies. Okies. We still use the term, not so much anymore, but when I was growing up, people still talked about Okies, and it was derogatory. The same way they talk about black people in a derogatory way. The Okies came to California. Who was it? Steinbeck wrote the book, Grapes of Wrath, about the Okies coming to California and how disruptive that was for the Okies. But it was also disruptive for the places they ended up. People weren't expecting Okies, just like the Europeans weren't expecting a flood of Syrians. They just weren't set up for that. And the French never really did bother to set up for that. So they have problems with their Muslim populations. Well, here in the West, we had problems with our Okies. And we talked about the Okies for a generation or two and how difficult they were and how, you push all of your fears onto them, right? They're the other. They're the invader. And back in the day, it was the Okies from Oklahoma, from the Dust Bowl during the Depression. That's why this is a black and white picture, and that's why this truck is as old as it is. This is the Dust Bowl. I don't even know when this picture was taken, 1931, right? 1933, something like that. We've had internal refugees before. We have done this, and it didn't work very well. The Okies were treated in the West Coast as badly as the Irish were treated when they showed up on the East Coast. They're dirty. They're barely literate. They're subhuman. I'm saying these things because that's what people said. I'm not saying it because I think it's true. It's obviously not true. But people said it because they didn't want them. And this was back in the Great Depression, and the Okies were treated poorly. I mean, very poorly, just as the Irish were treated poorly. And now that we're facing a new set of refugee movements within the U.S., this time, the Irish were not, but the Okies certainly were. Now that we're facing a new set of waves of immigration internally. So people leaving the U.S. South and Southeast and coming to, say, California or New York. Probably California more than New York. The South really detests New England. They just detest them. Oh, they'll take their money. If you want to move from New York to Florida and buy a second home and have your second home in Florida and live on the beach, they'll take your money. But they detest New Yorkers. And California is a little more tolerant because we have such a close relationship with Mexico. And Asia, really, too. So there's a lot of diversity in California. So when a bunch of angry, alienated, gun-waving white people show up, we're like, oh, okay, you're different, but that's okay because we're all trying to get along and we're all different in our different ways. And California is a little more open to that sort of thing. So a lot of these people will come to California. They'll come to the West Coast in general. They'll come to California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Nevada. No, not Nevada. Really not Idaho because there's no opportunities there. They'll be forced by their situation, which is they have nothing, to go to places that have a lot, where even the stuff that's slopping over the edges, the spare change is so much money that they can just slop into a new lifestyle. And they don't have to answer any questions. They don't have to pretend to be anything special. There's just so much money on the West Coast, in particular in California, that people can just kind of slip in here and just reintegrate and be okay. Just be okay. Not great, but not dying. And 3 square meals a day and a place to park your RV, and no one's going to look down on you. No one's going to look at you like you're weird. Hey, where are you from? Oklahoma? Are you an Okie? You're not going to get any of that noise in California. And maybe you would have 50 years ago, but you're not going to get that now. So they're going to come to California and also Oregon and Washington and possibly even Canada. Some will just slip across the border into Canada. After telling Trump, invade Canada, they'll just slip across the border into Canada as if none of that shit happened. Hi, I'm from the U.S. and I have money and I just want to live here in Canada and keep my head down and be quiet. And let's not talk about all that other stuff, shall we? They could end up in Canada. Unlikely. I don't think the Canadians want us. Good for them. They won't be happy people. And this is where things get tough. If they could just show up and integrate, then it would be fine. But they won't, because they're extremists. Almost the entire U.S. South and Southeast, and really the Midwest as well, is overtaken by alt-right ideology and extremist beliefs. This is MAGA country. And even if you probably voted for Donald Trump, period. You probably did. And you probably thought he was going to, protect the blood and soil and purify the nation. And this is their language, okay? This is how they talk about their vision for the country. I think it's all a bunch of horseshit. Of course, it's all Germany 1933 Nazi bullshit is what it is. But they don't know that because they don't understand history, and a lot of them can barely read. So they're going to say that, we have rights and we're white and we're Americans, and they're going to show up in these diverse cities on the West Coast seeking refuge. They're refugees. They're seeking refuge. That's what's happening. The weather has driven them out of their home regions and their home states and their communities, places where they were 2, 3, 4, 8 generations deep. Not 8, but certainly 4 or 5, right? And they're going to show up in these urban areas, and they're going to be hateful. They're going to be full of hate, because you don't unlearn hate through trauma. You don't unlearn bigotry and extremism through trauma. You were bigoted, extremist, and hateful wherever part of Texas, Louisiana or Oklahoma, wherever you lived. And then you were destroyed economically by climate change, global heating, and then you had to leave because the people around you didn't want you. Why? Because you're poor, and now you're demanding services. But the people around you have been cutting services because they don't want poor people to have services. Poor people should get a job. Poor people should die. Poor people should leave. And so now you're one of the poor people. You didn't expect to be one of the poor people, but now you are. And it's not your fault. You had a job, you had an education, your kids were going to a good school, you lived in a nice white community, and then some tornado outbreak came through and destroyed your house, ripped it off the foundation, you survived, and now you have nothing because you had no insurance, because you couldn't afford it, because of something else that happened in your community, and they cut then the insurance companies withdrew. And even if you have insurance, they're not going to give you another policy if you rebuild, so you're stuck, and now you're having to leave. And now, these people who thought that they could hang out in the South and the Southeast and the Midwest and be surrounded by people just like them, who are hateful and aggressive and gun waving and flag waving. Well, now you have to leave that community, and now you're not surrounded by like-minded white people. Now you're an internal refugee, and you're going to have to go where you can survive because your community doesn't want you because you're poor. That's it. There are no services for poor people. You lost your house. Oh, that's too bad. What are you going to do? Oh, I hope we get rebuilt. Rebuild? Who's going to rebuild you? Well, this community, we've been here for generations. Well, so now you're not. Get out. We're not rebuilding you. What? You expect Papa Trump to rebuild you? He's going to send FEMA in here? Didn't you hear he defunded FEMA? The FEMA doesn't even exist. There's no government money going to show up and rebuild you. You're done. Sorry to hear about it. But that's just the breaks, and we don't support people who get unlucky, so get out. And they're going to leave because no one's going to support them, because no one wants to support poor people who have fallen on hard luck. So they'll leave. That's why they left Oklahoma back in the Dust Bowl days. No one wanted to help them. No one wanted them to stay. It's like, you're broke, you're broken down, you got no story, you got no narrative, you got no money. Okay, well then we'll take your farm. Thanks, that's nice, and you have to leave. So noisy. And when they show up in places that do have services, in places that are tolerant, in places that are already diverse, and just don't look at people like that. Oh, you're from Oklahoma? You're an Okie? You're welcome. I mean, that's how it is. Our urban areas welcome everybody. Then here, get started, and we'll put you up temporarily in a hotel. We do that. That's the kind of shit we do. And we get hit over the head by the Midwestern states in the South and the Southeast. We get hit over the head for having that attitude. Well, Now we're going to be welcoming white people from other parts of the U.S. because of global heating, climate change. And the violence is going to attack their communities and tear their communities apart. We're going to have to accept these people. But they're not going to accept us. We're accepting them because we accept everybody. That's what we try to do. We have the money. The slop in our system is enough to fund these people. We have so much money. California alone is the fourth largest economy in the world. If you considered it a country, if you considered a California country, it would be the fourth largest economy in the world. We have the money. We can do this. And we have the diversity. So we understand the necessity of accommodation. And, you have it extra easy because you're an American. You can cross state lines. No one's going to stop you. You can come to California. You can set up in a new house, a new zip code, and have your mail forwarded, and everything works for you. So that's what will happen. But when they come, and even if they're welcomed, they'll be angry because they don't want to be here. They want to be outside our abundance, looking in and sneering. They're not going to be happy. This is not going to work. These are internal refugees. They know they're refugees, even if no one else does. They know they've been dispossessed and kicked out of their communities, even if no one else knows that. They know that they're in the enemy's camp. But we don't know that. They know that they're surrounded by people that they would never, ever work with or go to school with or even cross on the same side of the street with. Brown people, black people, Asians, wealthy brown people that own their own farms, Asians that own hotels, and you're having to rub shoulders with these people and you have nothing. And why couldn't the United States take care of you as a white person and make sure you're whole? And even though your house got knocked off its foundation 3 times in 5 years, that's no excuse. The United States have lots of money. Why didn't they just come in and rebuild me? Why am I a refugee? Why am I a refugee in my own country? Whose fault is that? That's someone's fault. Something wrong here. I'm a white person, a pure-blooded white person, and why am I a refugee in my own country? I don't understand this, and it's a conspiracy, and whatever. I don't even know what they're going to think about that. It'll be a conspiracy, of course, because everything is, but how are they going to frame that? Who are they going to blame for that? I don't even know. They'll come up with something, because they always do. Because they're illiterate and they're frightened of their own shadow and they're not strong people. And the only time they had strength was when they were surrounded by people that looked, talked, and acted just like they did. And now they're in an urban area getting services, because that's where the services are. They're in California, fourth largest economy in the world. We'll take care of you. And they don't like it. They don't understand it and they don't like it. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be like the Muslims showing up in Europe. I don't know why I'm here. Why couldn't I stay in Syria? Why did the Syrian government kick us and our entire family out? We didn't do anything wrong. Why did they send us to Europe? We're not happy here. There's no, there's mosques and there's Muslim communities, but, even they don't want us. Even the French Muslims don't want the Syrian Muslims. They have nothing. They have no money. They didn't bring their jobs with them. They didn't bring their farms with them. They didn't bring anything with them except woe and PTSD and other mental illnesses. And so even the Muslim contingent in France didn't want the Muslims from Syria. And they never integrated. And they were angry. And there's lots of news coverage about how angry the Syrians are in France. And the Netherlands and Belgium and Germany and the UK and every place else. Well, there was lots of coverage, and that's why you got Brexit. That's why you got Trump version 1. Because people were afraid of these people. So what's going to happen internally in the U.S. when we have exactly the same problem for exactly the same reason, dislocated people from the South, the deep South, the slave South, dislocated people from the Midwest, paranoid, don't understand cultural diversity, don't want it, don't want to see it, it's a threat, and of course all these potential neo-Nazis who have looked at the diversity in the major urban areas and seen it as a threat to blood and soil. Because that's what the German Nazis did. It's all a threat to blood and soil. And that's how they think. And yet their community was destroyed, their job was lost, Tariffs did something to their community. Tariffs did something to their job and their industry they were working in. And now they can't afford their house. Now they can't afford anything. There are no services where they are because, white communities don't offer services because it's always for poor black people. So they don't have services because they got rid of them all because poor black people. And now the poor white people don't have services. Well, I guess welcome to the land of unintended consequences. So now they have to leave and they have to go to California. And they would go to New York, but they hate the New Yorkers, so they don't go there either. They go to California and they try to start over, but they're angry. And they've got their 6 AR-15s and they got their 10,000 rounds of ammunition and they're angry. How is this shit going to work out? You explain it to me. Go down in the comments and explain to me how this shit works out. It doesn't work out. I don't see how it works out. I don't see how it possibly works out. There is no way forward through this that doesn't involve massive violence. I'm expecting global heating to destroy the southern third of the United States of America, and I expect that to happen. It's already happening, by the way. I expect it to proceed and accelerate over the next 5 years. And I expect my community right here to host these people. Wittingly or unwittingly, they will come. They'll just blend in, except they won't blend in because they know they're different and they like being different, and they will not like us, and they won't like our South Asians, and they won't like our Chinese and Koreans, and they won't like our Vietnamese, and they won't like our black people, and they won't like our brown people, and they'll see the brown people working in the restaurants and working in the fields, and they'll be full of hatred, and they'll see our black people riding on the bus and having businesses of their own and making, buying and selling real estate, and they'll be angry. They'll be angry. Why can't that be me? I came from a place where all the things I see were all white people, just like me. And I've been abused. I've been betrayed. And now I'm having to see all these people who I thought were just like basically subhuman, barely human at all, who should be living in squalor, who should be down, who should be way down, way below me, way below white people. These are people who were former slaves. Even the Chinese working on the railroads were basically better than slaves. And now look at them. They have their own businesses. They have their own kids in private school. I can't afford private school. I should have all this. You owe it to me. This should be me. This shouldn't be these people. What are these people doing here? They took over our country. They took everything. They took the jobs. They took the opportunities. And they're not sharing. And I don't want to be here. And I should be back in Oklahoma. And what am I doing here? And who are these people? Get them out of here. Donald Trump said he would export all of them. Get them out of here. I want them all gone. That's what's going to happen. I'm not making that up. That is exactly what's going to happen. American refugees in America forced into places that they would rather die than occupy. And yet, because they didn't die, they are occupying these spaces. Because ultimately, all of their Gadsden flag, white supremacy, American exceptionalism, it was all just vapor. It was just make-believe. It's unicorns and rainbows. They just made it up. It was all made up. None of it was real. None of it was ever real. They weren't exceptional. The illiteracy rates in these states is horrendous. They do nothing to improve themselves. They do nothing to culturate themselves. They do nothing to understand the world. They deny science. They deny intellectualism. Yes, I'm angry. I'm angry at these people. Just like I'm angry at the German Nazis. They claim to be the superior race. What? There's no evidence of that. There wasn't any evidence of the time, and after the war was done, and we got an actual look at what they've been up to. Oh, well, there's no evidence even when they were claiming it. Oh, we're now the superior race. Well, we see what you've been doing. Nothing superior about that story. Oh, and we're going to hang a bunch of you now, and you better clean up your shit. Okay? It's superior, not. And so the Germans had to do a mea culpa. They had to surrender their superiority. Well, these white people in America are just going to have to do the same thing. You're not superior. You're not special. You're nobody. You can't even read and write, and you're addicted to opioids. You got no job. You're collecting Social Security and disability. Meanwhile, you're trying to cut Social Security and disability because the wealthy people, Elon Musk, tell you to. Why would you do that? but that's what you're doing. And so now you're going to come to California when your house gets blown up by a tornado. Because you have to. Because the other white people in your community don't want you anymore. They'll take your land, they'll take your bank account, they'll seize your assets, but they don't want you. Get out. That's the world you created. That's the world that these people created. Intolerance. Sink or swim. Social Darwinism. They believe eugenics. They believe all this stuff. That's the world they created in their own image. And it's being blown to rat shit by global heating. Those people are going to find that they are attempting to live in a place that is actually, technically, uninhabitable. And many will just die in place because they're too poor. Okay, fine, fair enough. But some, maybe half, will have the means, the money, the retirement account, liquidate their business, whatever, and they will leave and they'll move and they will be angry. They'll be angry. The Mexicans that come to America, economic refugees, right, trying to work, trying to support their families, they're not angry being here. They're not. They've risked much coming here to work in our crappy strawberry fields, stoop labor, bending over for 10 hours a day, pulling weeds in the strawberry patches. They didn't come here angry, and they can leave anytime they want. They're not angry. They're trying to make a living, trying to support their families, trying to start their own business, whatever. They're seizing opportunities. You're never going to see any white people out on the strawberry fields bent over double with a short-handled hoe pulling weeds. Never, 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 never. And if the Trump administration is ever successful getting those brown people out of the fields, then the fields are done. There won't be any harvest. Nobody will be out there. Not white people, not black people, nobody. If you get rid of the Mexican laborers, you're done. And the farmers have told the Trump administration exactly that. Don't get rid of our Mexican laborers. We like the price. The price is right. And they're hard workers because they're trying to better themselves, and they're not angry. But when these people have been shoved out of the U.S. South, Southeast, and Midwest, when they've been shoved out by global heating, wherever they land, they are going to be angry and bitter and suspicious, paranoid. Hell, they're already blaming science for global heating. It's like the scientists invented this. This is how these people are. They can't take any responsibility for anything that happens to them. And then they blame someone else who probably had nothing to do with it. When they show up, and they will, in large numbers, by the millions, in these urban areas that can accept them and will, probably just will, they'll be angry. It's not going to be pretty. This is not going to be pretty. And for California in particular, Northern California, not Southern California so much because they're doomed. I think most of those people will just die in place, probably. The ones with money may end up going to Europe. I don't even know. They're not going to stay here. But anyway, so we've been through this story before, the Okies from Oklahoma, the Dust Bowl. It was disruptive, it was traumatic, and we're going to do it again, except this time with AR-15s. Wow, okay. This time, but with AR-15s and everybody angry. Okay, I hope that works out. I doubt that it will. I don't know what these people are going to do when they show up and have all their guns. What do you think? Should we nip this in the bud? Should we put an end to this? Should we tell these people you have to stay where you live now? If you don't have a home, then you'll have to live in a FEMA tent, a donated tent. You'll have to live down by the river in a tar paper shack, whatever. You have to stay where you are. You can't come here. I don't think we can do that legally. The Trump administration certainly wouldn't allow it. They'll close the border to the Mexicans, and they'll even close the border to the Canadians, but they won't close the border to internal refugees. They'd probably rather that they move into the cities and cause violence and take over, because then the Trump administration could send in tanks and troops. This time because the angry white people. And there would be a lot of them, millions of them, eventually. So we'll see. Linked in the description is a link to an interview I did with Finding Gnosis, and it was fun. Almost 4 hours, and some really interesting guest hosts that we talked a lot. It wasn't a debate at all. It was just discussions and sharing ideas and letting people vent. Also, my book is out now at Amazon Books. Link in the description to the ebook, the paperback, and the hardback. I ordered some copies. They should be showing up soon. I'll take a look at them. We may talk about the book a little bit as a book, do a book review or something like that. But right now, I'm still waiting for them to show up. It took a while. It's print on demand, so they have to set up a print job and print it and then package it and send it, and so I don't know how long all that takes. And as always, you can subscribe to the video. I come back on here every so often when I get something to talk about. And I've been really busy lately, making hay while the sun shines, as we say in the country. So I haven't been on here too much, but I'll come on when I can. And you can buy me a coffee. There's a link for that too. So if you want to support my work without buying the book, you can just buy me a coffee, and you and I can have a cup of coffee together the next time I'm on here. And that also works. So I guess I'm done for now. If you think I was hard on the American citizen refugees that are already on the move and will be soon a flood, leave your comment below what part of that I got wrong, and also maybe I overlooked something. Maybe there are bad things happening in the country that you're aware of and that should be brought to our attention, and this is a good forum to do that. And we might even do a part 2 on this when we get some feedback from people, like what's going on in their community and how bad it is in terms of people not being able to stay, people having to leave, being forced to leave. And this is a path forward. We're just going to have to deal with this. There's no way around it. We're going to have to deal with it. That's why I wrote the book, at least in part. The book is really about people staying in one place and how to do that when confronted with a regional disaster, meaning, or in this case, of course, it's a global disaster, so there is no place to go. There's no place to go. And what happens when there's no place to go? And I predict in the book why there's no place to go. I think it's a sound prediction. There will be no place to go. And you're going to have to figure it out in place. And we're not prepared for that. There might be a way to do it. We'll see. And there was a lot of discussion of this topic in those terms in the interview with Finding Gnosis. So if you want more of that discussion specifically about what people should, might, could do, check that interview out. It was fun, wide-ranging, and a lot to think about. So you got that going for you. More content. And that's it for me. As usual these days, I give people the same advice. Get ready. This is coming, and it's going to hit all of us differently. I may not be a refugee, but I'm going to be surrounded by people who are angry and confused and don't want to be here. And I'll have to accommodate them. And they'll have to accommodate me accommodating them, which is going to be hard for them. Know where you are in that spectrum. Where are you? And in the meantime, don't die.